With just 2 game weeks left to go of the season, if there was ever a time to take a bit of a risk, pick some differentials to try and climb the leaderboard, well, it's now. I'm going to go through my favourite differentials in this video. So I thought I'd start with some Rob T FPL data. I talk about this quite a lot in a lot of my content, but that's because I think it's one of the single best sources of useful fantasy football data that there is. Rob takes data from gambling companies and puts it in a way basically that's useful for FPL. So what we've got here is a view of game week 36 to 38 projected goals. Obviously 36 has been and gone. I've covered up 36 and we're just looking at game weeks 37 and 38. And what I thought would be useful is essentially just to go through, teams that are most likely to score goals over the next few game weeks, or next couple of game weeks. We've only got 2 left. And that might help you decide players you might want to pick. I've got some individual players as well that I'll talk about later on, but I think it's worth highlighting some of the teams with good fixtures for the rest of the season. So Man City, well, they're top. They've got some, well, they're not actually top. Liverpool are top for the next 2. But they've got a couple of nice fixtures against Bournemouth and Fulham. The question is, though, with that FA Cup final in there, just not entirely sure how they're going to line up in game week 37. Obviously, Marmoush got benched in game week 36. And I just don't think there's room for a Man City differential in there. The one that I would name, if possible, would be Foden. But you just can't trust his minutes, right? He obviously started in game week 36, but that certainly does not mean that he's going to start in game week 37. I think my gut feel, to be fair on Foden, is that he started in game week 36. I just dropped my phone. So he doesn't play in the FA Cup final because I think he's fallen out of favour with Pep. Then he might play again in game week 37, but I just don't think we can trust it. Liverpool, I'm just not sure about Liverpool, really. They're looking all right at the moment. They're not quite completely on the beach. They started really well against Arsenal, to be fair. But I just think game week 38, at least, there could be some major rotation for them. So, yes, you might be able to predict how they're going to line up in 37. But I think that final game of the season, Arne Slot might well play some youth players. And if that is the case, I just think it makes their lineup a mystery. So I'd probably stay clear of that. Arsenal, I'm thinking maybe the likes of Saka, Martinelli, maybe Havertz if he comes back fit, Marino, they could be decent. And the thing is, for Arsenal, they have something that they're fighting for now to the end of the season. Now they're out of the Champions League. You'd imagine the slump of being out of the Champions League now, if that even existed against Liverpool, would be over. They do have Newcastle, which is quite a tough fixture. But Newcastle have not been amazing defensively this season. And it is at the Emirates. And on the final day, they have Southampton. And I would imagine not many people have Arsenal players in their team at the moment. Well, they might have defenders, but I think Arsenal attackers, with them being in the Champions League, risk of rotation, etc. Just not knowing their minutes. Well, they're probably lowly owned, and I quite like the thought of picking them. Villa, I definitely like Villa attackers. Tottenham and Man United in their last 2 games. 2 teams that are targeting the Europa League, definitely not prioritising the Premier League. The thing is, because Ange made a lot of changes to his team for game week 36, I would anticipate that just to get some minutes in his players' legs, that he might give some of his best players a run out in game week 37. Even still, though, those players are not going to be taking massive risks. They're not going to be diving in for 50-50s, trying to win the ball like their life depends on it, because they'll be saving themselves for the Europa League final. And it's the same for Man United as well. I think Villa have, on paper, probably not the best 2 fixtures, but I think in reality, with the fact they're both prioritising the final, I think Villa have got a good couple of fixtures there. And I think the suspension in particular to Jacob Ramsey opens up the door for some lesser owned midfielders to get some minutes. Quite like Bournemouth. I think that projected goals of 1.1 against Man City is a little bit of an understatement. Man City have done well defensively in recent games, but I don't think, they've kept clean sheets, but I don't think they've performed all that well defensively. I do think Bournemouth could do something against them. And then they've got Leicester on the final day of the season. And you think about Bournemouth assets in the game at the moment, my top 3 would probably be Cliver, Evan Nilsson and Semenyo. Probably not all that popular at the moment. Chelsea, again, they're probably not all that popular at the moment. I think the likes of Cole Palmer. Jackson's obviously suspended. The door opens up for maybe a Chelsea attacker to come into the fray, and I might be talking about one of them later on. Brentford, top 3 assets being Mbeumo, Wissa and Sharda. I think Sharda's a known differential, who I'll talk about in a bit more detail towards the end of the video. And Mbeumo and Wissa, they're great options, but they're not really differential. Newcastle, maybe Anthony Gordon with those two remaining fixtures, Arsenal and Everton. I do think they're going to have a tough time of it against Arsenal. Forest, they seem to have dropped off the ball a little bit. That West Ham fixture is good. I would say maybe Chris Wood or Langer would be the two I'd consider. They haven't made the video in terms of individual entries for me. But I can't imagine they're all that popular. Could be good options. Brighton, they're kind of in the mire, aren't they? Not too much to play for at the moment. Yeah, I'm not sure I'd go near there. Just looking at the rest of the teams. I quite like Palace, but with that FA Cup final, I think there could be some rotation. West Ham, outside of Bowen, I don't think I'd go anywhere near them. Everton, McNeil's back, doing okay. They've got Southampton in 37. Maybe he could be an option. That's kind of where it's at in terms of projected goals. I'm conscious I've just spent 5 minutes talking through all of this, but hopefully that's useful. We'll go on to the clean sheet odds in a second, and then I'll talk about some individual players. But hopefully this, you know, even if you don't suggest or think of the players that I've mentioned, might give you some ideas as to some players you might want to pick. So clean sheet odds then, and this is going to be a little bit shorter, I think, than the attacking odds, basically. Don't get me wrong, I think there's going to be some clean sheets for some teams. You can see there, quite a lot of teams have above 30, some above 40% clean sheet odds in the remaining games, right? But I think if you're going for differentials in the game, I just don't think it's worth picking defenders, because outside of Trent, he's probably not going to play for Liverpool again. Outside of Guardiola, who, well, most people probably have in their team, and Munoz, of course, of Crystal Palace. There aren't a whole lot of defenders, I think, that will really score well in terms of, you know, have the likelihood to get attacking returns and clean sheet odds. I maybe would have said Jake O'Brien of Everton, but he didn't even feature at all in Game Week 36. Yeah, I'm just not all that excited about the defences at the moment. Maybe Aston Villa could keep a couple of clean sheets against Tottenham and Man United. That's possible. Their defence is probably not massively owned at the moment. But quite honestly, if I'm chasing points, chasing rank, trying to pick differentials, I think at this stage of the season, I'd want to pick attacking players. Let me know, though, in the comments if there's any defenders that I certainly haven't mentioned many. If there's any defenders that I haven't mentioned that you think could be decent options. All right, so the first player I wanted to talk about is Ollie Watkins. Now, I said about Aston Villa, and I said they got some good clean sheet odds and some good fixtures. Well, I think with Rashford being out, Ramsey being out, that opens up the door for Ollie Watkins to get some really good minutes. 8.9 million, 19.6% owned in the total game. This is a stat you'll see across the video, but players' ownerships overall might be quite high. But at this stage of the season, we all know there are lots of people that have just given up on FPL, right? And their team is sitting as it was earlier on in the season. So I think one of the best ways to know, like, active managers, active engaged managers, and the ownership of these players amongst those is I've just looked at the top 100k effective ownership, basically. And Ollie Watkins sits at 6.94%, which surprised me, to be honest. I thought he'd be a little bit higher than that. Tottenham at home is his next fixture, followed by Man United. I think he's probably going to start both of those games. Get good minutes. Villa obviously chasing Champions League football, which I think they have a realistic chance of getting, by the way. I really do like Ollie Watkins. Now, someone in the comments might correct me, right? I might be totally wrong. He's not very good at penalties, to be fair to him, is Ollie Watkins. But with the sheer amount of injuries that Aston Villa have, Tielemans being out as well, of course, I think the door could be open for Ollie Watkins to take penalties. And I think those couple of fixtures are really good. 6.94% owned in the game. A lot of people might be on someone like Mateta, for example, who I think has not performed all that well recently. His other teammates have, but he hasn't. And he'll likely start in the FA Cup final, which I think could affect his minutes. So yeah, maybe from Mateta, maybe Isak, if you don't fancy Isak against Arsenal, maybe you could hop on Ollie Watkins. Now, this is probably a little bit more punty, even more so than Watkins. But I think with that Ramsey suspension, it opens up the door for Marco Asensio to get some decent minutes as well. He's gone off the ball a little bit since he made his debut for Aston Villa. I would say when he signed for them in January and played those first few games, he looked absolutely amazing. He looked probably Aston Villa's best player, actually. That has kind of dropped off, but so have his minutes, in fairness, as well. I don't think, you know, the fact that he's not played the best level of minutes has probably impacted his form. But again, like I spoke about with Ollie Watkins, with Ramsey's being suspended, I think it could open the door for him to be a pretty good option. Again, you got him suspended for 37. I think Ramsey's suspended for just the one game week, so he'll be back for 38. I guess that raises the question, does Asensio start in game week 38? But I guess when you're picking differentials, you're taking a risk, right? You know you're taking a risk when you pick these players because they're not safe 90-minute men on the most part. So yeah, go into it knowing you're taking a risk, but I think Asensio could be a good option. Again, just going back to what I said about Aston Villa, fighting for something till the end of the season, and of course, 2 really good fixtures against teams that don't seem to be bothered about the Premier League at all at this point. Now, this is more of a 1-week punt, but Jamie Vardy is 1 goal away from scoring 200 goals in his Leicester career, right? He's got Ipswich at the King Power Stadium at home in Game Week 37, then Bournemouth away in 38. Now, I don't think he's necessarily the best option for Game Week 38, but I just think the motivation behind Jamie Vardy, with Leicester being relegated, right? I think, honestly, it's quite sad, but I think it's the truth. A successful end to the season for Leicester, I think, would be giving Jamie Vardy a good send-off. And I'm sure Jamie Vardy will be motivated to get that 200th goal. And I'm sure his teammates as well will be motivated to get him that 200th goal. He's 0.16% owned in the top 100k. And they face Ipswich up next. I think, particularly that Ipswich game in mind, it's a good fixture, right? It's a very good fixture. And I think he's got every chance of scoring that 200th goal in that game. And at just 5.3 million, if you really don't fancy him in that Bournemouth fixture, I think you can quite comfortably just stick him on your bench and play 5 midfielders or something like that, for example. Yeah. It's more of a 1-week punt for Game Week 37, don't get me wrong, but I do think Vardy could be good. And also, you know, maybe if your season is over and you really can't chase rank, there's no point doing so and you just want to have fun. I think he's probably the most fun pick for Game Week 37. So yeah, I'd definitely look at Jamie Vardy if you're that way inclined. Right, I've got a couple of big hitters coming up next that are lowly owned in the game. And first one being Bukayo Saka. Now, I sold him a couple of weeks ago, and I'm already thinking about buying him back. You know, similar to what I said, well, I said it earlier on in the video, Arsenal, they're safe, I think, in the Champions League, but I think out of pride, they'll want to finish above Man City, which I think gives them full enthusiasm and motivation to play well against Newcastle, which is obviously, looking at the next 2 fixtures, that's obviously the tough one. Saka, though, he's obviously been amazing. Definitely been Arsenal's best player this season. But he's only scored 6 Premier League goals in 23 appearances, which is not amazing. But I do think he's by far and away Arsenal's best player, right? Their talisman on penalties. At least he should be, even after missing one. Yeah. I think that Newcastle at home fixture is tough. But I just think with that motivation Arsenal are going to have behind them, I wouldn't rule him out being able to score in that one. And I think maybe when you do a comparison between him and Salah in terms of, you know, teams that are motivated, I think Arsenal is probably ahead of Liverpool now, just in terms of remaining motivation, although obviously Salah's going to be motivated for that individual Premier League assist award. And then, of course, in Game Week 38, Saka has Southampton at home. Now, I guess jury's out as to whether Arteta will rotate massively for that Game Week 38 fixture. I guess it depends how things go in Game Week 37 in terms of Arsenal's league position. But I think you're looking at Game Week 38 and who the best captain might be. When you're looking at Saka against Southampton, I think he probably takes that role. He is the best captain for Game Week 37, or 38, sorry. So yeah, I quite like him. And when you look at, I usually consider a differential at 10% or below owned, but he's 11.32, so it's really close. I think that's enough for me to consider him a differential. It's close enough to 10, let me off. I think he could be a nice option. Now, this one, I'm probably going to get some stick for, right? And I'm definitely not saying his recent form is case to sign or bring Cole Palmer into your team, right? But we're thinking differentials, risk taking in order to gain rank. 3.9% owned in the top 100k. And the reason I'm saying Cole Palmer is mainly with that Game Week 37 fixture in mind. I think he is like the ultimate punt as a captain. You know, Man United at home at Stamford Bridge. Again, we spoke about Man United definitely prioritising the Europa League. Chelsea with something still to play for in the Premier League. Man United always seem to struggle at Stamford Bridge as well. Chelsea are at least tough to beat there. And he played well against Liverpool. And I think the game against Newcastle obviously was kind of outdone by that red card to Nicholas Jackson, right? I think that completely changed the game, of course. So I don't think you can form a massive opinion on Cole Palmer with the fact they had 10 men. And he did have a good game against Liverpool. Like I said, I'm probably going to get some stick for this, but I couldn't not talk about him, right? He still had a really good season. 25 attacking returns from 35 appearances. And he's obviously got Man United at home next, which I think is one of the best fixtures you can get in the Premier League. I think, for me, teams to target at the moment would be the 3 relegated teams and Man United and Tottenham, because they're not prioritising the Premier League. So yeah, I definitely think he's a decent option. Let me know, though, what you think of that in the comments. You probably think I'm just crazy. And finally, my personal favourite, because I picked him in Game Week 36 and he scored, is Kevin Schade. 5.2 million, 4.55% owned in the top 100k and 2.8% owned in the game in total. I think Brentford have got a couple of good fixtures in Fulham and Wolves coming up. And yeah, he's in really good form. 4 goals in his last 5 games. Really good record. And he's not even playing 90 minutes in every game. But I think, you know, the fact he scored 4 and 5, I think is justification enough to keep starting him. I just don't think he's going to be a nailed-on 90-minute man. But I think, you know, I'd ride this kind of purple patch. We tend to see this across FPL. And it tends to happen with like 1 or 2 sub 6 million midfielders every year. I remember a few seasons ago, Miguel Almiron, who was sort of I wouldn't say a squad player, but not necessarily, you know, Newcastle's best player at any point. He went through a run of really, really good form. I think that may be a couple seasons ago now. And I just have a feeling Kevin Schade is doing something similar for Brentford now. Final 2 fixtures are good. Current form is good. You've obviously taken a little bit of a risk with the minutes, with the fact he still hasn't played 90 minutes yet, despite scoring 4 and 5. But again, that's the nature of differentials, right? You're not going to get guaranteed minutes with them in the main. And I think he could still be a good option. And, you know, hopefully those players I've suggested, like I said, I've not talked about any defenders because, well, I just don't think they're good enough in the game at the moment to get you that level of points to climb rank. I think these players I have mentioned as individual assets are good ones to pick. All right, well, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful. Like I said, I don't usually make videos about differentials, but for the last couple of weeks, I thought it'd be useful to do so because, well, in this position at the end of the season, we've got 2 game weeks left to go. 2 game weeks, 2 potential transfer windows, if you like, where you can actually make changes to your team to gain rank. So, you know, I think it's the time to take punts and go different if you can, because you're not going to get another chance to do it. So yeah, hopefully those players all resonate and make sense with you. Let me know in the comments if there are any others that I haven't mentioned that you want to. That's totally cool. Just be polite about it. If you have enjoyed the video, leave us a like rating. I might have already said that. And if you enjoyed the video and haven't already, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the Goal to Goal channel. The support on the channel this season has been absolutely fantastic. And yeah, long may it continue. I really appreciate you all. I'll catch you in my next video.